I think we're live, almost, maybe. I don't know. I'm going to have to wait for some people to pile in here. My fellow bots. I like that term, bots. Even though it has a negative connotation, in my use, it's a positive. If you're one of the Aussie's robot bots, that is a plus, a positive, a term of endearment. A compliment, if you will. Anyway, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. Actually, need something else to drink besides this water. All right, Alvman, we got one person in. One person in the room. Welcome, welcome. Hey, I have to ask... Do you guys like my thumbnail? That robot with the '08? That's actually a Nixie clock. One of the old, like 60s era, where they have the beep bop, boop. Yeah, so the thumbnail I use, I kind of like that picture. Now, the picture itself came from Germany when I bought the actual custom toy. That was a custom piece made by Hank Gosse's. And the Nixie clocks are really cool. They count down. It's actually a working clock. I don't plug it in because I'm afraid to burn out those tubes because they're actual tubes. Oh, it's your Friday? That's cool. That's cool. I wish it was my Friday. Well, no, Friday for me. My Friday would be Sunday because Sunday then we sort of shut down on Monday and Tuesday. So... I'll wait. I'll give it a little bit of time for a few more people. Whoa. So I don't know if any of the Sticks people are here. He suggested StreamYards. I actually signed up and, like an idiot, bought like a year's. Is that a like a fireman schedule? I know, like, the firemen do, like, 2 or 3, like, long day shifts. I don't know why I'm working. I should have been retired, but I'm not, unfortunately. I feel like I work every day. I haven't had a proper vacation in 7 years. Not that I'm complaining, but I am sort of complaining. And, hopefully, well, I do have one scheduled in June, so. In June... I'll be going to Hawaii with my lovely spouse. Not Hawaii. What the hell am I saying? Hawaii. Going to Alaska. An Alaskan cruise. I used to work in a warehouse. I worked for a big manufacturing company. That's when I was Tommy Boy. And I was like on the sales side of it, but I would actually go mingle in the warehouse. And then I would learn to drive the forklift, so when they were shorthanded, I learned how to unload the trucks, the trailers that would come in. It felt rewarding. Felt like you accomplished something. Once you forklifts are like a skill, and the thing is, make sure you don't drive those forks into like somebody and decapitate them or impale them. But the office side of it. Was pretty interesting. Like I had, that was my first, that company was my first experience with a trans person in the early 90s. I'll tell that story. It it's kind of a non-event. So I can't imagine food. I had like automotive parts, and so they were non-perishable. I'm assuming you deal with perishables. So... Now, going back, this had to be late 80s, early 90s. And this company was huge. In fact, when I started working for them, they were the 24th biggest company in the world. And they owned all kinds of stuff. Chemical, mining, gas. Gas was a big thing. Oil, plus automotive. They built nuclear aircraft carriers. What's that company? Newport News Shipbuilding was one of their subsidiaries. So they had their fingers in a lot of stuff. They also had packaging, hefty bags, that kind of stuff. One of the biggest packaging companies. So eventually somebody somebody thought, hey, you know what? This company's worth more. The individual parts are worth more than the sum of the whole. So they split them up, and they were right. You know, the individual parts, the stocks did really well on their own, except for automotive. That was like one of the worst performers. But it was. I learned a lot. I learned a lot back then. And you really had to bust your ass. I went up through the ranks and, you know, learned to deal with like multi-million-dollar customers, multi-million-dollar accounts, multi-million-dollar distributors. But man, I would have loved to have been on the food side. I probably would have gained like 100 pounds. I got to lose like about, 6 to 10 pounds now. Man, if I worked on the food side, I can't even imagine how much food I would take home. But it'd have to be that good Italian food, like when I lived in New York and they had those good Italian delis. All right, who else is here? I may have to. Well, I should have. I should have notified my Facebook minions. Maybe I'll do that. Because I know I have some people on Facebook. Let me let them know. Let's see. Them there, and who else? Oops. Anyway. How many do we have here? Well, it's getting a little busier. Go back on here. So I looked at the votes. You know, there weren't a lot of votes, but the votes were for... Let's go back to... where is this? Where is this? 83% wanted to stream, so I said, all right, let's go for it. I'm guessing Josh was my no. Josh, if you're ever... Well, I don't see you on here, but I'm guessing Josh was... Let's see. Yeah, you get food perks. I like food perks. I used to get a lot of food perks for various reasons. But having a budget to take clients out, you know, then you get to go all kinds of places, which was nice. You know, it's funny you say the test kitchen. When I was in elementary school, I must have been one of the little brainy kids. I guess I was the nerds, one of the nerdy kids. I was selected, like with a group of other kids, by some, I guess, focus group or something, to select packaging. And I didn't realize they were doing testing for McDonald's, right? And they had a bunch of us kids, different grades, and we had to select. And at that time, they were still using styrofoam. And it was McDonald's. And McDonald's wanted to know which packaging us kids, and I'm talking like we were maybe 7 or 8 years old. And they laid out all these packaging in front of the tables. And they had the coolest container. It was like, it looked like a flying saucer. It was like a dish, flat dish. And the top of it actually screwed on lightly, screwed on to the plate part, to the dish part. So it looked like a flying saucer. And you know, you got a chance to vote on your favorite. Now, if you remember the old McDonald's, when they were in styrofoam, it had like the clamshell, looked like a clam. That was the one they went with. That was my least favorite. So back in, this has got to be in the 70s, I guess. So I was like part of the people that voted against it, and must have been overruled. So the container I liked was this flying saucer and they said, well, why do you like it? I said, why? Because you unscrew the top, you could put your hamburger on the plate part, and then you have the dish, like the cup part to put your fries in. It was awesome. It was an awesome idea. But they ended up going with that boring clamshell, which I guess worked until they finally got rid of the styrofoam. And then I remember the campaign, like the little kids, it takes 5 million years for the styrofoam to degrade. So then they got rid of it. Now they just wrap it in paper. But the styrofoam was actually pretty useful. So anyway, if you're anyone else on the stream, just send a comment so I know you're here, and then I know kind of like what we're discussing. Before I get into other stuff, if let's see if let me close that. You know, I was going to mention it yesterday, and it would have seemed very prescient today. You know, the market is totally. I'm not going to say collapsing, but it's significantly down. And I was going to mention, be afraid of the dead cat bounce. So for those that are aware or not aware, you know, like the dead cat bounce in financial terms is a term they use to describe, well, if, you know, it's funny because I've actually run over a cat once before by accident. I was driving down in South Florida when I lived there when I was going to college. And I was going very slow on a street that was right next to the street I lived. And a cat just mysteriously or inadvertently just darted out under my car, like split second. I didn't even have a chance to slow down. So I ran the cat over. Now, and I was horrified. So I immediately stopped, and this little girl was, and I guess it was her cat. She was on the side of the road, and the cat literally bounced really high in the air. I guess it was a nervous reaction. The nerves are still operating. I mean high, like higher than the car, and it freaked me out. You could tell the back was broken. Only time that happened, thank God. So there is a dead cat bounce, like a literal physiological bounce if you run over an animal, like a cat in particular, I guess. Now, I haven't run over other animals, thank God. But in financial terms, the dead cat bounce refers to, let's say, for instance, the market, the fundamentals are poor, and you sense that things don't look really kosher, for lack of a better term. And you say, despite your, better instinct, and you notice things are rising, and it goes almost against your grain. You feel like, why are they rising? Well, that's known as the dead cat bounce in investing terms. So it's almost like a false positive. You might have a few different reasons why, despite a lot of negative indicators, things would go up. But then, has happened today, you have a significant pullback. Now, at the peak, I think it was down over 700 points. Now it's still down 471. And I was going to say yesterday, be careful for the dead cat bounce, because we were under the impression, the banks are all stabilized, blah blah blah. Well, look, the fundamentals that got them in trouble, I'm sure, weren't exclusive to SVB. So better judgment would say err on the side of caution and be prudent. So you could expect that there could be other, like a contagion or other banks that suffered this fate. So anyway, that was something I was going to bring up, and it would have made me seem like Nostradamus had I done so, but I didn't. Yeah, I know. 401s are, the other thing, the other buzz terms in, a lot of, the experts, the experts like to say, well, these things are priced into the equation. They're priced in. Yeah, well, in this case where we have higher interest rates, not high relative to historic rates, but high compared to what we had for years and years, they'll tell you, well, yeah, you can go into, let's say for argument's sake, 5% treasury bills. And assuming the government doesn't collapse and then they won't default on paying your treasury bills, their bonds, whatever. if I look back when I went heavy into the market, it was like late 2020, the fall of 2020. I think up until now, like I would only be up around, which we're talking like 2.5 years. I'd still be up maybe like 10%, 10 to 12, 10 to 12, maybe 14 in the most ideal. And probably not because they were tech heavy. Back then, if you especially look at your 401ks and things like that, you know that like investors, mutual funds, things like that, they would go heavy into tech. Oh, it's the growth. Even the growth funds, whether it's Fidelity, Vanguard, or whoever, and a lot of people got into these growth funds. They weren't heavy into, the Googles, Apple, Facebook, which is now Meta. And so they took a huge pounding. I mean, they're down in some cases over 50%. So there's a good likelihood that your portfolio might actually be even if, let's say for argument's sake, the Dow, like in my case, I think it was 28,500, and now it's at 31.6. So even though it's up 3,000, well, my portfolio might be still flat because of the tech exposure, for example. So the point I'm making is that, and I think a lot of people's cases, you'd still be better off in like stable, low interest, as opposed to what some, these so-called advisors try to tell you. But anyway, I don't want to get too heavy into that. Anyway, how many? All right, we're up to 10. I'm going to get into the toys soon, but I rail on Bill Gates, and I wonder if I could show this. So, and you know what? I'm kind of happy that the bottom of all this part of the screen filled in. And like I said, for those that follow Sticks, and he suggested Streamlabs, I signed up for Streamlabs because you could simultaneously broadcast on Rumble and I guess Odyssey, because I have that too, but not BitChute doesn't do live streaming. But I couldn't even figure out how to I guess you need like a streaming key for Rumble. So I went on Streamlabs. I signed up for a year because you can't do the cheapy freebie to do it. And then on top of that, it wasn't picking up my camera or my microphone for some reason. And they're like, close out everything, restart your computer. I did that, and it still wasn't working. So whatever. So I invested a year in StreamYard, not Streamlabs. But I'll figure it out. And then I'll try to do it, the simultaneous streaming. All right. So, I do have kind of like axe to grind with the Bill Gates of the world. And rather than me rail about this guy, just watch this clip. I'm only going to play a couple of minutes, and you could tell me what you think. And hopefully, I don't, I'm using this fair use or whatever. I hope Jimmy Dore doesn't get bent out of shape.
I wanted to show you this. Joe Rogan said this most recently about Bill Gates and his investments in vaccines, and I think it's really good. Here we go.
Foundation profited millions of dollars on the vaccines. Millions and millions of dollars. It's all easy to find. And then once he dumped the stock, then he completely changed his narrative and he started talking about how ineffective the vaccines were and about how the virus wasn't as bad as we thought it was and about it was mostly targeting old and obese people. Like, this is fucking wild, because this is the same guy that through the entire pandemic was talking about how great these vaccines are, and these vaccines are so effective, and they stop the virus, and they stop transmission, they stop infection, and all that was a lie. And he profited off those lies. Yes. And everyone wants to pretend that he's just like this amazing philanthropist. Like, no, he made a lot of money. This is motivated by money, and his entire career he's been motivated by money. Yeah. I mean, he's been a guy who is really good at monopoly, and that was why they went after Microsoft so many times for monopolistic practices. I mean, he's a businessman, and in that time, his business was the business of telling people things that he's not educated in. Right? He's not a scientist. He's not a virologist. He's not a medical doctor.
He's not even a college graduate.
He was this public health advocate on television telling everybody to go out and get this medical intervention that he would profit from, which is fucking wild. It's really wild that it's that transparent, that it's not like multiple steps in shell corporations and it's really difficult to find out where the money's going. It's like, what the fuck is going on? This is crazy how transparent it is. You're not even hiding it. It's right there.
And just to back up what Joe said, here is Bill Gates about a year ago, and he started to admit about the virus, what we all knew, and here it is.
And then at that point, we didn't really understand the fatality rate. We didn't understand that it's a fairly low fatality rate and that it's a disease mainly of the elderly, kind of like flu is, although a bit different than that.
So there he was admitting that the virus wasn't as deadly and as scary as everybody he made it out to be, so he could mandate vaccines that he's invested in. It wasn't. Turns out it was like the flu. Like it's just really elderly people and people who are obese and comorbidities need to worry about it. So probably we shouldn't be injecting kids with that and healthy young people and giving them all kinds of things. And so here he is now after he cashed in his stock. This is what he says now after he cashed in his stock.
We also need to fix the three problems with vaccines. The current vaccines are not infection blocking. They're not broad, so when new variants come up, you lose protection. And they have very short duration, particularly in the people who matter, which are old people. And every one of those things is...
So that's what he's saying now. If I would have said that stuff, they would have taken my YouTube channel down. But now Bill Gates, the guru of vaccines, gets to say it because he already cashed out his money. He got $500 million. Go ahead.
Well, every one of those three things he said would get you deplatformed.
That's right.
That's it. That's it. By the way, if you want to feel like Superman, dun, 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 another shameless plug. I couldn't resist. I had to do that. I do like the, it looks like a little camera here, right? Yeah, so that's enough of that. And, yeah, I have to rail about this stuff because, oops, get out of that. Because, you know what? I've said it about this guy forever. I've said it. People worship somebody like that. And, to make the last mention of a guy like Scott Adams, remember he made his racial comments and everybody was like freaking out. You know what somebody should mention to Scott, like when he was talking about, some people are, I wouldn't want to live next to some people or who's dangerous. I think Bill Gates is probably one of the most dangerous people on the planet. Imagine being able to buy media companies that you could actually coerce to tell you to inject something in your body that may or may not be safe. And you can promote that as a business, make hundreds of millions of dollars, then cash out, and then you don't care. That's pretty freaking dangerous, more so than, a lower income area. And by the way, I used to wrestle in high school, and this is just a quick funny story. I remember when my Challenger, my first car was my 340 Challenger, blew a rod, and my uncle lent me this old Buick station wagon. It was huge. It was like a rust-colored, like a coppery Buick station wagon. I think it was like a 71 maybe, kind of the same year as my Challenger. So it was those giant boat cars. I mean, huge. We threw these orange pillows in there, and it had rust on the bottom of the fenders. So at that time, it was in the late 70s, so it wasn't even that old to have so much rust on it. But at the end of wrestling practice, I would take like a lot of the kids that didn't drive home, and some of them lived in the projects, and I went right through the projects. Once I got to know the people there, they would, I was kind of like friends with a lot of them, and they would call me my N-word kind of thing, and I would hang out and sometimes play basketball there. Like, so, when you become friends with people, right? Like, now this isn't just because that was a minority area, because like as an Italian kid, it's just to kind of correlate. There was an Italian section, which we didn't live in, but there was an Italian section of my town. And if you went in there, even as an Italian, like the kids there, they were kind of like always in a cliquey gang, and they would mess with you. So no matter that was common back then, especially if you were into the Irish neighborhood, it was the same thing. People would mess with you. They, very territorial. So that was common among all kinds of people. But yeah, my thing to Scott is find somebody more dangerous than the Buffetts, the Gates, the Bezos, those types. They can do a lot more damage, I think. Anyway, so And, finally, when it comes to this, I just want to reiterate, financially, like until these companies worry about profits versus, D&I scores and ESG, like I'm kind of staying away. That's my non-solicited advice. And don't take my advice for it, but I'm not going to support it. Anyway, going to toys now and robots and collectible stuff that hopefully you guys like. I'm friends with Kitahara from Japan, probably the most famous of all collectors. And, his warehouse must be like unfreaking real. And I saw this. When I first saw this on Facebook, I actually was thinking it was one of the custom Shibakin pieces, but it's actually by another artist. I think the artist's name was Suzuki. I think. But anyway, check this out. I'm going to keep the sound off. Hopefully he won't mind. This is basically like a sculpture of Astro Boy. That's why I have it on the stream name. How cool is this thing? Well, we'll make it full. Oh, I can't do that. I can't see. Well, maybe I... So this is a life-size interpretation made of Kevlar, which kind of looks like carbon fiber. So it must have been done early. Right? Doesn't have that carbon fiber look. I think this thing is phenomenal. Those are the repulsors on the feet, or his jet feet. I like the tubes. And they always have those plasma balls. I think I was the first guy that did a custom plasma ball headed robot. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I just wanted to show you this. He's just got some amazing stuff. And also, if you haven't checked out, if you like collectible stuff, I mean, he's got really, really amazing things, I would say. And I don't even know how to pronounce. I'm assuming this is his collector channel. So check it out, Kitahara's. I mean, you could find it somehow. And if worst comes to worst, I could put a link on another video if you're interested, but I would subscribe to it. And that's enough of that. So, moving right along, the other thing I'm going to bring up now is, and I'll leave this on here because it's a good backdrop. One of the early books, I know the longtime collectors know this, but if you're kind of new to the robot and space toys in particular, I'd say one of the books that you should find is this right here. This is Boogaerts. This is the first collectible book before Kitahara. Kitahara came out, I think, early-ish, mid-'80s. This book came out in 1978. Now, what I find fascinating is that he had toys from... could have been like 70s. So basically he had like new Horikawa robots in here. Not a lot, but some. Now, this has like this weird plastic coating on the pages that hunk just fell off. So I don't mess with it too often. I don't like to open it. The spine is kind of flimsy. But the one thing I do like about this book over a lot of them is because the age of this book is 45 years old now, a lot of these toys were, when they were fairly new. So you're looking at almost as close to almost close to new condition that were photographed back then as you can get. So that's a plus. So one of the things that, I go through that I just think it's interesting. Because at the time, let me find it here for you, so give you some context to what I'm rambling about here. It's the super cycle, because I believe up until the one that I acquired out of Japan, his was the only super cycle that had the original dome on it. And it should be somewhere here. Now, if you could see this here. You see that dome over there? Now, the one thing I noticed about his dome, there's a lot of clearance between the plastic man and the dome. These things shrink over time, and it's conceivable his shrunk a little bit. It doesn't have to shrink a lot to, make it significant. But the reproductions that they make have a lot more clearance. So I'm not going to, I'm pretty confident that his is original, but when I look at this, the plastic looks a lot thicker. And the one that I have, it really hugs the head. Now I'm going to be honest with you. I'll just come out and say it. I'm not convinced that this dome is the original dome. I'd have to see it because my example is so tight on the head. And the other toy that I have that's like that is and I got out of Japan also. And it's like this with the dome easel back robot. The Z-Man, I think I have the nicest Z-Man in the world. And I haven't done a video on that. And if I had a mobile camera, I could show you. I'm flipping through this book to see if he has one here. And if he does, he probably didn't have the dome. And again, it's that really thin plastic that gets also a little yellow over time. And just sit tight or bear with me while oh, here it is. He did have one. He did, in fact, have one. And now, this you could tell. He didn't have the box like I do, but it's hard to tell, but there is a dome, and it's really hugging that. And it's hugging it to the extent that you can't make the excuse that, well, on the super cycle that 45 years passed and you had some more shrinkage. I guess I'd have to go through, I think it was the Rosen catalog. Maybe it wasn't Boogaerts that went to, because I believe a lot of this went to Bob Lesser, and that's where I thought the original domed supercycle ended up. But like I said, now I'm questioning the validity of that. So, I know this is just kind of like weird nuances of stuff that people may or may not care about. But this is kind of a big deal because I guess for me, if let's say that one isn't correct and that was the one that was eventually sold to Bob Lesser, and then eventually, I think it might have gone to the Al Rosen collection. If that isn't the correct dome, then I would have the only one in the world to this, known. So, that's just, for me, that'd be great. But I hope it's the original because I hope that, somebody else, another collector, has one. So I'll just, kind of flip through a few more pages for you guys to see here. But maybe I'll just review this book. It's a lot easier than trying to show you stuff here. Really cool. Some black and white, some color. I think I have pretty much all the robots, well, all the ones that I want. And the other thing that he had, if I could find it real quick, was they called it the flower robot. Oh, by the way, here's my Italian gumball machine. Oh. You see all those toys in there? Now, it's funny because, again, this is a 60s machine, and this book was 78, so it wasn't that old. So he had this flower robot, and people didn't know if it was real. And it turned out that it was real, but it wasn't even a Japanese toy. It was a Hong Kong toy. And then boxed examples were found. Not that many, but some people questioned whether it was authentic or real. Here's the flower robot. There we go. So for a long period in collecting history, people were fascinated by this. Was it a real toy? Was it something that somebody cobbled together. I had these tins, some 1950s. I still have it actually, baby powder from 1950s. It had this flowery tin, and my parents saved it. And I wonder, they actually marked it. This was the baby powder we used on, my oldest brother. I'm like, wow, that's like pretty specific. Why they saved it, I have no idea. But I guess they were preservationists like me. So you always wondered, did somebody take a tin like that and fashion it into that? But no, it was a legit robot, and it had nothing to do with flowers at all. It actually was like this fire chest shooting robot, and just so happens that they used that flower pattern, but the box was all like shooting, destruction, mayhem. Very cool, and still very valuable. All right. Let's see. I'm going to keep it kind of short today, so I don't have much longer to go. I do want to follow up on yesterday's when I mentioned the hollow expression robots from post-war. We were looking at 1949. So as we transition into the 50s, we still have the blank look, right? This is the expression that a lot of people identify with the early robots, the blank stare. And, Marcy, the designer of my T-shirts, she made a T-shirt with this imagery on it, the Zoomer robot. And not only did she sell it out a long time ago, but it's become very collectible in its own right. So again, it's this hollow blank expression, and people try to figure out, was it the post-war malaise? Was it the shell shock? Was it, the result of, coming through like a nuclear, attack, Holocaust, whatever you want to call it? Was that why they still had this very bland, generic, expressionless look? Or was it just simple to design? They were trying to figure out, hey, what are our robots supposed to look like? Because after the mid-50s, they started getting a lot more personality, although I would argue that this has a ton of personality. But it's very iconic. There's a lot of them in this series. Now, there's one version of this that's battery operated called the musical drummer robot. And this is for the people that don't actually know the toys. That toy is much more elaborately lithographed, has a much more expression, but the box itself is fantastic because the toy's drumming through like a hellfire landscape. The buildings are burning, and he's just like going along drumming. I mean, it's almost like a post-apocalyptic scene in the background, and this robot that has the same body as this just drumming away like nothing's happening. I mean, it's a real contrast of imagery, and I'll have to show that next time. Anyway, so just another kind of historical look, and you guys can think about like how you would interpret this. If it's something that you think, hey, maybe they just designed it because that's just the way they came up with it. It's also interesting to think of the comics back then. Like, I think there was some Superman comics that he was fighting robots, and it'd be interesting to go back and look at other depictions. So by the time that Zoomer robot, and by the way, I didn't even notice this till now. And I don't think this will come up in the camera, but on the leg here, you do see it a little bit. You have the George Wagner, who was the distributor. You have the Nomura logo, the T&N logo, but I never even paid attention. But up here you have this circle, which you could see, and I have no idea who the circle belongs to. So I find that kind of fascinating too, and I'm gonna have to take a picture of it. It's its own design. Again, let me see if I could bring it up here. And if there's any collectors out there, you tell me. Have you seen that circle up there before? Have you even paid attention? Because it's a logo I haven't seen on anything else. George Wagner was the distributor. And finally, I just want to remind everybody. Oh no, why am I on Amazon? That's not what I wanted. If you're interested in the robots and space toys in particular, and when the chat was all dominated by Alvman, what happened to all you other visitors? You should have been chatting away. Anyway, this is the Alphadrome website. This is the robot talk portion of it. This is there's thousands of members on this website. I would encourage all of you to go to Alphadrome and you can register there. And then we'll go the robot talk. Let's first go to the main page. Whoops. Let's try that again. So this is the main page. And yes, I did acquire the website, but there's no monetization there. There's nothing. Well, I guess maybe Google AdSense, like at the. Now, let's see. You were a lurker. Well, do you still post? That's the thing. Do you still post on Alphadrome? But anyway, like I said, there's no monetization there or anything like that. But it's got a tremendous resource, a database, if you will. And if you want to learn about stuff, like for instance, you go here and it's got a freaking amazing cornucopia. Now, Josh, were you the no vote? I think you were the no vote on the live stream. If I had to guess, it was you. But anyway, so the database, you can sort it by flying saucers, miscellaneous space toys, space capsules, space figures, space guns, vintage robots, space toys, space vehicles, plastics, and more and more. So let's just click on robots, since this is called Ozzy's Robots YouTube channel. There's also like subcategories, and there's like a zillion things here. This is the way you can educate yourself. I spoke with Brian, the founder of this site, the creator. A long time ago, I asked him, Brian, why don't you create a Facebook group for this? Because, Facebook has so many people, and he just wanted no part of it. And at first I thought, I don't understand. I don't understand like why you wouldn't, because there's 2 billion people on Facebook, blah 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 blah. Now, despite what some people say, Facebook, I know that they're like it's Zoomer book. People under 18 don't use it. I don't care. Well, who cares what under 18 uses? I know they did that. Well, if the 18-year-olds don't use it or the younger, it's not going to survive. I don't believe that. Like, how many under 18s are using eBay? eBay's surviving. So the reason I say that is because I know Josh knows this. Facebook they're not really monetized correctly, in my opinion, right? I don't even want to give them ideas in a sense, but let's just say there's a lot of opportunities for Facebook based on the specific collector groups, among other things. Well, Josh, we need to get together at the museum. We need to schedule it on Alphadrome. That's the other thing. We've scheduled bot stock was like the robot Woodstock that happened, even though I hosted my own and I didn't go to the other ones because I just always conflicted with me. But now I'll host one at the museum here at some point this year, and fairly soon if we can get people motivated. And there's a lot of apathy from people, but hopefully we can get them. But anyway, so, at first I didn't understand why Brian was reluctant to do it, but now I got to tell you, I'm 100% on board. First of all, it dilutes it, right? Like, I liked it for the fact, like, okay, now I can put a face to the people, the members. But, when I thought back when the internet was in its infancy, what happened was And Yahoo used to be pretty cool. Yahoo used to have a lot of groups, and what did they have, like the chat rooms or something like that? Yahoo was a mishmash of like Google and Facebook, even Twitter to an extent. They were offered both Facebook and Google for pennies, and they turned it down, and they were so arrogant. So sometimes companies are completely misrun. Now they're just like a vestigial part of Verizon, I think, owns them. So I use Yahoo email, and which still works. And I like actually Yahoo Finance, but they're an absolute shell of what they used to be. And I mean, by all practical intent, they could have been out of business, which would suck for because that's my biggest email account. But, anyway, the point I'm making is that it's better to have, decentralized internet, in my opinion, because what happened was when there were websites like Ozzy's Robots, like Mark Bergen, like Cyber Toys, like Bill O'Neill's Space Toys, and on and on and on, you would go hunt to these individual websites, and people ran them and dealers ran them, and that's how you would find stuff. eBay comes along. At first, it was like minimal to list stuff. It was kind of like a Wild West on there, and it was fun. I got to say, it was fun. They didn't have a lot of structure, but eventually, what they did is they put a lot of the dealers out of business. I could show you something. Let me see if it's handy. Hold on. Well, I didn't find it, but I did see cool stuff. I'm going to do it on another video. When I think next video, I'm not going to discuss anything that's non-toy. I'm just going to be like more like toy and historical toy thing focused. So for those that don't like anything that's not toy related, the next stream will be focused on toy and just a lot of personal toy stuff. Because one thing I was going to get to was I have a lot of letters. People would send me letters. Do you want to buy this stuff? Do you want to buy that stuff? And they'd send me pictures of items. That's how I got my first Jupiter robot. Somebody in Texas said, hey, we bought this. It was a mint Jupiter robot in the box. I'm like sitting there like peeing my pants. And those that know the Jupiter robot, this thing was like one of the holy grails at the time. It still is, but so they're like, we bought this for $2. True story, like at a freaking garage sale garage sale. And at that time, the only sale that I could find was, I think it was Matt Wise had one loose in '94, I think. Was it what was before that? Matt Wise might have been '89, but it was early. Or it was either '94 or '96. And anyway, long story short, the loose one sold for anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000, which was like grossly undervalued. But anyway, and that was without a box again. And so I wrote him back. At first they had called before they sent me the letter, and then they sent me pictures months later. It was like Polaroids. Remember Polaroids? Polaroids were like the predecessor of GIFs, of like phone pictures and texting. So I get these Polaroids like 6 months later of this Jupiter mint in the box. I'm like, I just had a freaking heart attack. And they were in Dallas. So I booked the ticket so fast. I flew there. I made an offer, flew down there, bought this thing cash, paid for it at the Burger King at the Dallas airport. And boom, I was gone. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. That's how I got my Jupiter robot. But the moral is that back then, people would communicate with you direct. Once eBay took off, there was no longer a necessity for that to happen. And everyone just threw all their crap on eBay, which, to some extent, if you were a buyer, you're like, well, good, I don't have to go through the dealers. But it just... then, unfortunately, eBay, between fees and everything else that happened, it just became like an impersonal, just crappy experience. I think if you deal with eBay now, you know what I'm referring to. And now also, there's something. Well, now you have to have like 1099s if you sell a certain amount or whatever. Like in my case, I'm not a business, but also like the tax collecting aspect. It's become very unfriendly for like just an average Joe to throw a couple of things on there. It's almost completely reversed where you do want to go back to the dealer. And then the other thing, like for me to say now as the owner of Alphadrome, right? Do I want to dilute Alphadrome and then have to operate under Facebook guidelines and their auspices, and maybe somebody says a curse word and I'm like, they don't like it, or no, because that's the other thing with their groups, you have to follow their guidelines. So I'm like, no, you know what? Brian was right on the money. Keep it as its own independent thing. And I actually support going back to the old days of the internet where people have their own sites. But having said that, I do like Facebook for the collecting groups. It's good because you have thousands of people and, if you want to share stuff and you do find items that you like. And, if I have something that maybe I don't want any longer, I can go into a group and say, hey, you know what, is anyone interested? And you kind of, you could do it without the rigmarole of dealing with eBay. And I think that's a good thing. So, yeah, Josh, I agree with you. I think like toy shows, you know what I have to do? I have to create a toy show down here. I could actually do a toy show when I think about it. I could do it at my building here. I could do it on the weekend, just commandeer the entire lobby and host it at the museum because the parking lot is big. I think there's almost 100 parking spaces here. Nobody uses the building on the weekends, the other tenants, so I don't have to worry about like other businesses. Or worst comes to worst, there is the Hilton Garden Inn over here. There's a big Marriott, like 10 minutes away. So I can host a show, toy show. What do we want to call it? A high-end show? A high-end show, I don't know. In a sense, like I don't know that I'd want to have like cheap Hot Wheels and things like that. We should talk about it. I think, Marcy does like the tattoo convention, right? So we could put together a show because I don't want to have, we also should limit it to like an era, right? Like, I don't know that I'd want to go beyond maybe like mid 70s. If I did, a hotel, right? Like they have a huge, probably convention. I don't know if they have a convention center per se, but they have a huge lobby. But it doesn't really matter because you know how these things, you start them small. And if they get big, you expand. Now, the other thing I can do is I could just put tents up in my parking lot, where we still do it. We could do it outside, but I can have huge tents. So I can have kind of indoor, outdoor. And then, we start them small. If it grew to the point where we needed like a convention center, a big convention center, they still have them. They have them in Jacksonville. They probably have it in St. Augustine. And we can utilize that. Yeah, I would love to do that. I wonder if we can get other people on board. And for me, you end it off with like some kind of event at the museum. That would be freaking fantastic. What does everybody in the chat think? Man, the chat's quiet today. I only heard from 2 people, even though we've had a bunch of people in and out. I like that. I mean, at some point, if you watch this stream after the fact that, because I get a lot of views after this has, kind of gone just as a regular video, I think you should let me know. I do agree that would be the way to go. Like, have events. I will say this though. I put my first ad in, it was only a couple weeks ago, and it correlated with the big tournament here, the golf tournament. And the response was kind of lukewarm, but it actually came out like the week of the same week, so it wasn't like really preparing anybody. Did I expect a little bit bigger result? Probably, but it was one of these, kind of like throwaway magazines, the freebie magazines. So it wasn't like a huge effort, and I haven't really pushed the marketing end of this. But overall, I do have a major collector coming this Saturday. As a matter of fact, he's coming to visit the collection, which I'm happy about. Which reminds me, I have to we had dinner plans. I have to rearrange them. But yeah, nighttime live streams. I have, the thing. I'm going to be dead honest with you. Sometimes I'm just tired at the end of the day. I just do so much crap in the day that by night I'm just kind of like, I just want to veg out, watch a movie, walk on the beach, and. By the way, let me do another shameless plug, my second one. Dun, dun, dun. Which one of you have bought this already? Josh, did you buy a t-shirt? You better have bought one. If not, I'm going to have to add it on your bill or something. But yeah, like my Sunday stream got the most views Sunday morning. And you're right, like when people are home. But I also take into account time zones too. So that's something else to consider. But yeah, I'm gonna have to. Well, that's why I call these test streams, because I'm kind of vacillating on when I can do them, and part of it is the time that I have available, the days that I have off. I could try one at night, maybe tomorrow night. Since you brought it up, tomorrow's what, Thursday? Maybe I'll do a night stream. Because, we assume that everyone's on the East Coast, though. Keep in mind somebody like John is on the West Coast, right? So he's what, like 3-4 hours early? So if I do it at 6, hypothetically, he's going to be in the middle of the afternoon over there. But yeah, it's something to try. Something to try for sure. And, we'll see. So anyway, I think that kind of wraps it up. So I hope, and look at this cool stuff. On Alphadrome, this is the most comprehensive database that you could find. And by the way, I have these 2 banks, I'm proud to say. And I don't have this Batman, which begs the question, why don't I have it? And how much is this worth? And before I go, Josh, if you know how much this Batman's worth, it looks like he's all vinyl, though. Does he have any tin on him? Maybe I shouldn't keep looking at these... Maybe I shouldn't keep looking at all these Batmans, because I'm going to be like wanting more. And here's a Zoomer-related robot that I just... oh, yeah, here's the prototype. So another prototype. Again, whether you see this stream live or after the fact, please go to the Alphadrome webpage. And the best place you could register and then ask questions here, Robot Talk. This is where all the cool kids hang out. The cool cats, the cool boomers, and the cool youngsters. This is where you can ask things like, can I do small video upload? The answer is no, we can't. And I feel bad. And I hope Brian sees this, because, I know Brian has taken the, still like has been running this. I just have been too busy to like really, take over at this point. But, at some point I have to get like a more dedicated web person to do this stuff to alleviate the burden from him. I'm sure he didn't want to like divest himself of this only to keep doing it. And, I did also start the Alphadrome YouTube channel, and that was strictly for cool boomers, Josh, cool boomers. And now I wanted to do like a video database. So that's what I'm waiting for. I just have to figure out a way that people can, either I have to allow people to log into that account. That's the problem. It's password protected. So if it's somebody I trust, but I wanted to start with, say, like a beautiful Lilliput video in the box, and go from there, chronological, with the robots and the space toys, and then just have a video database for the Alphadrome YouTube channel. That's what I would like to do, as opposed to like my narrated, quirky videos. So we'll see. I mean, it's work in progress. I have so much stuff on my plate. It's hard to juggle all this stuff at once. So anyway, listen, thank you for past and future viewers. I appreciate your time. Josh, thank you for joining me and adding your input. Oh, well, now we have the most people watching. I'm more compelled to stay. So, leave some comments if you want me to stay or go. Well, boy, it shoots up from like... Yeah, we can talk. Marcy's scheduled to come down for books. We're going to do some books, Kitahara style books, not necessarily in the art layout, but have some small books that we could sell and make appealing for people. So we definitely need to discuss how to do the database type videos for Alphadrome. So this way, like I said, I don't want to really kind of cross-pollinate the two channels. I want them to be very distinct and separate with their own separate backgrounds, their own logos and everything. So all but the Bellata collection involvement with Alphadrome is strictly like funding it to keep it afloat and hopefully growing it and making it more appealing. That's it. Other than that, like I want it to survive on its own. I don't want to, just absorb it and I want the brand to stand out on its own. All right, man. With that, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. Don't forget to thumb up these videos, share them, and as always, thanks for joining me. And